Hi friends, my name is Mackenzie. This is my channel Think Too Much. Welcome to another installment of Coffee Chats with Kens. I was talking to Max and my friend about other people in transition in life, transitioning, what their work is, where they're living, like all that stuff. And I think I said something like, oh yeah, it's like the time of the quarter-life crisis, like that's about where we're at. Or I said like everyone just had their quarter-life crises and so they're like springing into action in response to that. Anyway, so I thought that might be kind of an interesting thing to talk about. That was actually another one that like when I first started the YouTube channel, I was interested in potentially doing a video on, because like part of the reason I started a YouTube channel was because I was like going through a quarter-life crisis, which I think I feel the need to clarify for those who like aren't familiar, like it's not as dramatic as the name implies. It's just kind of like a colloquialism for, I guess, this kind of stage in life. You're in your mid-20s, you're kind of like settling into your career. You're no longer kind of transitioning into like that part of adulthood, you're just like in it. And I imagine like part of it is kind of a result of beginning to settle, because I think at the beginning of the transition it's like, wow, everything's happening, like I'm trying not to be broke, I'm trying to like find an apartment, I'm trying to establish roots and like all this stuff. And then it's like kind of once you get there, and it's like once the job kind of levels out, and like, that's less stressful. Once you like have your network, that's settled, once you kind of get all of those ducks in a row, I feel like there's this kind of moment of like, well, what now? It's kind of this weird thing where I feel like I can almost float above myself and like watch myself experience it and almost like understand like where it's coming from, like why it exists, but then still feel kind of this like, I think it just needs to like pass in a way, or I need to trust that like whatever things I'm putting into motion now are going to like facilitate this kind of weird stage in life, this like crisis, to like eventually just go away. But I feel like I started feeling this way probably like more than a year, but at least a year. And I think last year in particular, I was really going through it. So I guess like it's less new to me, and it's definitely better. And I think it's worse in the winter when we don't have, or at least like if you're a Northeasterner, when we don't have access to like sunshine. Like these are all of the, I guess, context clues, me talking out of my ass about it. If I were to guess, like, kind of some of where it stems from, I would think it has to be the fact that, like, you spend the beginning of your life getting an education. You spend the beginning of your life, like, going to school. And, like, I imagine the quarter-life crisis, which, like, I think can hit at varying stages of people's lives. I imagine a lot of it is just kind of a response to this, like, wow, like, I spent my whole life learning how to do this one thing, and now that I'm transitioning into, like, my career and, like, that part of adult life, I'm just reacclimating to like how to do that and how to understand like who I am within that space, and like understand what makes me happy and like what makes me feel content, kind of with these new life factors in play. Something else that I've kind of considered that I also feel like might play a role is like, I know for me at least, going to school felt like a largely like self-serving thing. Not always, like I feel like there's an extent to which you go to school because you're legally mandated to, obviously. And like I'm someone who took to school well, so like I probably felt more like it was for me and for my aims than like people who, I don't know, didn't respond to those structures as well, or just like didn't like it, or just like wasn't really their space as much. Like I was always pretty comfortable in school, so like part of how I've made sense of my kind of core life crisis definitely has to do with the transition away from like kind of doing something for me, or just like relearning what it means to think of my day-to-day as like something in service of like my goals and my aims when I'm working for someone else. Because when I'm in school, it's like, well, it's like I'm doing homework for the teacher or for the professor, but I'm not really doing homework for the teacher or the professor. I'm like doing it for a grade so like I can get into this college, or like I'm doing it for a grade so I can like, I don't know, make sure I learn what I need to learn in order to be a successful career person, or just whatever. It's like always kind of in the service of something that I want and like an aim of mine. And I'm sure that there's a way to think of one's career in the same way, but it's almost like relearning the language of, okay, technically I am doing this task for someone else, or like in service of like someone else's aims. But like, how can I understand that that is also somehow in service of me? So I don't know, I think that is part of the struggle, I guess, as I've been, dealing with this and reflecting on it for the last year, 2 years. That's like part of how I've made sense of it, is just the adaptation to like a new way of life, essentially. Not completely new, obviously, but just rather than going to school and getting homework done and like having academic goals, looking forward to the rest of my life, I'm kind of in the period of like the rest of my life now. All of these things led up to me being a careered adult. And now I'm here and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? So that's kind of funky. And I'm sure we could launch into some discussion about capitalism and working and the emphasis of work in our American culture and like all that fun stuff. But I won't bore you because you can find a zillion articles on that subject. And also it's just like not that helpful. We are not going to be outside of a capitalist system anytime soon, or at least doesn't appear that way. So I guess I can resent it if it makes me feel better, but it's just like not going to do that much for me at the end of the day. So that kind of is like something that's been going on in the background for me for the past couple of years. And I also knew to kind of expect it, because when I was interning in the city when I was like 19, all the people I was interning for, or like the people who were like associates that were managing me as the intern, I would watch them go through quarter-life crises. All of them. It was astounding, actually, and like the amount of transition. And it's so funny that like at the time I couldn't understand it as well. I think I was worried about having to experience it because it sounded bad. But it was also kind of, I guess, interesting to me that it's like, oh, but you got the job and now you're going to transition away from it. Not in a judgmental way, but in like, I don't understand this kind of a way. Like, why? Like, what's going on? And that's, I guess, I don't know, the difference between like then and now is just like all the context of like, oh, I mean, like maybe it doesn't pay the way they want it to, or like maybe it isn't as fulfilling as they thought it would be. Maybe they don't want to live here. Like there's just like kind of all of these things. And I think you start to feel this pressure when you like start to approach 30 to kind of get your shit together and like figure it out, because I don't know, in some way the idea of marriage, like starting a family, it's like it almost looms, where it's like, well, once you enter that stage, that's it. Like there's not, you might be stuck here. Like there's like this weird pressure. I'm sure in some ways it can be true, but I think in other ways it's like also probably imagined. But there's this like sense that it's like, oh, we'll do it now before you're tied down by like marriage, by kids, by like whatever else. And I feel like that's been part of it too, where it's like parenthood looks really hard in America and just everywhere, like in general, but also like structurally it looks hard in America. And so the idea of transitioning in my life, like where I'm living, like what I'm doing, like all the things at that stage seems like a lot. And so I think the underlying anxiety is a little bit like, well, I guess I should change now. I should figure it out now. But then the other part of me is like, but I just got here and I'm still getting to know like what it is I even want out of like this stage in life. How am I supposed to already make decisions? I hope this is making sense. I think it is. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, this has kind of been going on in the background for the past like year or so. And I don't know, I was thinking about it today and I kind of wonder if it's not that it's gonna like go away. I kind of wonder if like I'm just going to get used to these questions, these like pressures, these fears that kind of exist. Like, I mean, in some ways they will be dispelled because I will get to the point in life and I will like see what it looks like. But yeah, I wonder if this is the kind of thing that's like not going to go away. It's just going to be like the kind of pressures, thoughts, like questions, fears, anxieties that are a part of this stage of life that like I will just kind of get used to and like adapt to. One of the, I guess, kind of like self-narratives I have crafted as I've kind of gone through life and just come to understand myself a little bit better is I tend to react to new environments in similar ways, or like my reaction to a new environment manifests in like similar ways. And I've just like come to understand that better as I've become an adult, just because I have like more years of experience like living in my own body the older I get. So I'll explain more concretely, but basically it's like when I'm in a new environment, there's this kind of like pattern that occurs. It's in the new environment, start to experience like more negative thoughts in whatever way that might manifest. So it's like, I think one of the easiest ways to explain it would be like, sometimes I will be in a new environment and it's like, I hate my reflection. Like just the way that I look, I don't like it. It's like a new mirror and like my brain is like, no, we are not happy with this. And like very critical, whatever else. And I've just kind of learned over the years that like that's just something that my brain does in new environments. And so like I can remind myself, okay, this is new, which means self-criticism, like negativity looms for me, because that's how my brain reacts to new environments, new stimuli, and I know it'll pass. And like I will kind of develop either the mental guardrails that I need to develop in order to like better acclimate or like feel better in the environment, or the negativity will just like fall away because I am used to it and like my brain is not on like high alert for danger anymore. I hope that makes sense. But I think in some ways like that logic can probably be applied to the quarter-life crisis, because it's the new environment is like this whole like being an adult with a career thing. And I guess as I've reflected and kind of really considered like, wow, you know, I was living my life completely differently for 20 plus years before this. And I'm only like 4 years into my career, maybe 3, I don't know. Time doesn't exist. And so, like, of course, it's going to take a while to adapt. Even with school, I remember I had, like, a system, and this is when I was really young, but I got good at school because I figured out, like, a really solid system for me to essentially utilize each new semester, which was start the classes, work really hard in the classes, get a good feel of, like, what they will require of you, what level of difficulty they are for you, whatever else. Create the systems within that system in order to set yourself up for success for the rest of the semester. Like, get, like, as good grades as you can for, like, the first part. And then at the end, you can breathe a little bit. And then once you've kind of got your kind of go-to system, like go-to ways of thriving in the class down, it'll just be a little bit more natural and like you won't have to work as hard. But like there was always this consistent, like work really hard at the beginning, figure out what you need to do to succeed in this class, like what it specifically requires of you, and then kind of trust that system going forward. And it's going to be like a little bit more relaxing by the end of the year when you need to focus on like the big tests or whatever else. And I think over the years, I kind of learned that I had that system, and I learned how like beneficial it was. And almost like I almost imagine that like in some ways like that was like a microcosmic example of like stage in life things. So like, you know, at the beginning stage of my life was getting educated. Now I'm in the stage of my life where I am like careered. I'm still, even though like I'm a couple years into it, I'm still in the learning phases of like, okay, what systems do I need in place in order to thrive here? Like what do I need to do to like, you know, rather than ensure success, but it's like ensure happiness. It's success to some extent, but also like ensure like happiness, contentedness, and that sort of thing. And I'm just still, it's almost like those two, that system plus the whole like self-understanding of like when I'm in new environments, my brain tends to go negative. Those two things combine to create my current experience of like the quarter-life crisis. So honestly, this chat was more cathartic than I thought it would be, because I don't know if I was thinking really hard about the quarter-life crisis stuff this time last year and was just so, I think, in the middle of it and so overwhelmed by it. And I did like, I read up on it, and I actually read this really cool book called Quarter Life. I would totally recommend it if you're going through like something similar to what I'm describing. And I guess like I'm sure I'm kind of utilizing some of the tools that she explained in the book just subconsciously. Couldn't name them for you. But I tore through the book. It's really good. Anyway. It's almost like revisiting this topic after like not really thinking about it as much as I had like this time last year, and just like experiencing life after gathering all that information and whatever else. It's almost like now I'm kind of looking at it with more clarity of like, oh yeah, you know, this might be something that doesn't go away or isn't like fixed by like a move or a step or like whatever change you're thinking of creating. Not that you shouldn't create the change, but maybe don't expect that to fix it. Maybe it's just a matter of adapting to this new way of being, new way of thinking, and the discomfort that adaptation brings about. So for me, it can be like the negative thoughts, which, I don't know, I guess I'd never really put the two together. I don't know. Food for thought for you, I guess. Food for thought for me. I a little bit pulled that one out of a hat. This was just me like stream of consciousing, so hopefully it wasn't boring. But yeah, quarter-life crises, they're funky. And like I said, if I were to guess, it's like these kind of thoughts, feelings, questions, fears, anxieties, I don't know if they're going away so much as like just something that I'm going to get used to. We're going to get used to if you're with me. Anyway, that's like where my head is at right now. Guess I've given myself some kind of thoughts and reflections to chew on. I'll either keep you updated or I won't keep you updated on that. Who's to say?